Okay, so a big news day, perfect timing for Bobby Marks, ESPN NBA front office insider, joining us again on the show. Bobby's always real good to us, and especially on a day like today, where, I sent Bobby a message. Yes, I was like, hey, would love to have you on the show. Maybe we could talk about some moves that the Heat could possibly be making. And then this morning, I wake up and we get the news that the Heat did finally move on from Kyle Lowry. How long do you believe, Bobby, the Heat were actively trying to move Kyle Lowry?
Well, I mean, listen, anytime you have a player on a $29 million expiring contract and the likelihood is that he's not part of the future, that plays into it. And then I think, the last week, 2 weeks of how they've played, I think certainly jumpstarts things where, listen, that Brooklyn game, they certainly could have lost. And then they lose the 3 games in a row. Two are really, I called it the malaise games, right? That Toronto game and then the game against Orlando, and you lose at the buzzer. And then it just kind of expedites things as far as, trying to get a deal done. Like, it's funny, we're seeing a little bit of a trend. Teams always like to wait until the deadline to do things. But if you're Miami and hey, or if you're Charlotte, if they think that's the best deal for Rozier, like do it right now. Like we don't, there's no rules saying you have to wait till February 8th here. And so I think that sped up the process here. And it's funny, we talked about it on NBA Today on Monday, because I just went through kind of the financial element. And I said, listen, a year ago or 2 years ago, the conversation between the Heat front office with Andy and Pat and ownership with Mickey would have been like, hey, we're going to make a trade and this is how it impacts our luxury tax. Or, this trade, they would have been like, whoa, we just saved $15 million, and now with this new CBA, it's like, all right, we have a trade on the table, and this is how it's going to impact our luxury tax, and this is how it's going to impact next year based on how all these different rules are in place. And anytime you trade an expiring contract for a player that's got money left, with Rozier, who's got 2 years left after this year, then there's that conversation. But Andy and the group are the best in the business as far as dancing around that second apron, because what the second apron does, and the second apron is projected at 190, is it eliminates you from sending cash out in a deal and putting money together. So if a Donovan Mitchell, for example, became available, you wouldn't be able to combine money from your own team to go out and do that. Now, you lose a draft pick as part of it, and that's just the cost of doing business. But I've said all along, I just thought these $20 million guys are more valuable than max guys, just because they're out like that. Especially how Miami's got their books. It's like their fourth or fifth guy. It's not Bam and it's not Jimmy, and it's not, Hero's a little bit below that. But now you slide that in. And so I thought Kyle was going to move all along. I just thought, was it going to be now or closer to the deadline? But I do think how they played the last week and a half has really kind of pushed the needle a little bit.
What do you think? So, from your experience in a front office, what's likely happening behind the scenes over the last couple of weeks? Yes, they had the bad losses to Atlanta and to Toronto, and then they also lose to a good Orlando team. But Lowry came off the bench the last 2 games,
Yeah.
and was pretty sour about it after
Yeah.
the games when speaking to the media. So, what's this process like behind the scenes?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things here. It's certainly the player demeanor, and is it a negative effect on our roster right now? It's trying to help him out, get to somewhere where maybe there's a buyout, or maybe he can be flipped again by February 8th. I think what you don't want to do is, especially from a player's perspective, is trade on February 8th and not be able to find another home unless you're bought out of your contract. So I think you're trying to help the player. In that process, I think you're looking at the standings also. I mean, you're looking at the standings, and all of a sudden, like, you go from being in that, like, hey, we're number 4, right? And now you're like playing, right? Like, we're back into that playing group here when you look at how Cleveland has played and New York has played. And, Indiana's lost a couple games since the Siakam trade, and they go out and make a trade here. And it gives you like that 2.5 week window before, all right, we got our books in order, right? We go under. We save a bunch of money. We get under the second apron, right? We're like $6 million. And that's important. And that's important more for the offseason here, because if Miami would have finished where they are, they wouldn't been able to go out and buy a second round pick. They wouldn't been all those restrictions come into place here. Is there a deal out there where maybe we save money? We've solved our trade exceptions. We've got a bunch of trade exceptions. You created a 6.3 in this deal. We still have a roster spot. So it gives you kind of a 2.5 week window where you can maybe, do we need another bid? Is there a guy out there that makes that makes sense for us?
How surprised are you, Bobby, that it only took attaching a first round pick? Apparently, it's protected in 27. If it doesn't convey, it'll be unprotected in 28. I always thought if they were going to get someone significant, you'd probably have to attach Caleb Martin, I felt, to Kyle Lowry. So, two questions. How surprised are you that it only took the one first round pick? And how unique is a team like Miami where they seemingly only make deals the way that they want to make deals? Like, they're never pressured into it. They're never bullied into giving up more. If they value player X at a certain amount, that's what they value him, and they don't go over it.
Yeah, there's a walkaway number here in Miami, and you know this well. Like, they don't rarely make in season on the court impact trades. I think the last one was back in, was it like 20 to 21 trade deadline, which was in March, when they went out and got like Trevor Ariza and
Jay Crowder.
That group around there, and that certainly helped them. And yeah, I mean, I think, listen, they had basically two number ones to work with because of they had a 25 first going to OKC that had some protection on it, and two for Rozier would have been rich. Like, you got to leave something in the kitty as far as something comes down the road eventually here. And the Martin thing, with him, he's got a player option for next year. You got to figure out as far as how he fits into what the plans are here. But yeah, I mean, Miami, like as you said, they're not bullied into like the losing streak. The 3 games and how they played didn't all of a sudden say, you know what, we're willing to offer 1, but man, we got to do 2 now because we need this player right now. Like, hey, if they didn't make a trade for Rozier, okay, let's move on to plan B, right? Who is it? Tyus Jones? Is it one of these guys out there that, maybe we can get, at the same price?
How do you think Rozier fits in with the Heat?
Well, he's a bucket getter, right? Like, he's not kind of like a pure, and I think we've gone away from the days of like pure point guards, right? Like, there's not like that idea anymore where we get scoring guards, right? Like, we get guys that can score. You can put Tyler at the point if you need to, but he's a guy that you really don't have as far as a bucket getter. A guy can kind of, whether come off the bench or certainly will probably start. But he can get on a hot streak, similar to kind of like, Jordan Clarkson was another guy we heard somewhat about here, but I think he'll fit in fine. I mean, the contract's really good as far as how it fits. Team that needs scoring, team that, over the past couple of years has, struggled shooting the ball, except when they got into the, last game of the play-in and then carried over, like we forget, like this Heat team was like, not good shooting the ball last year during a regular season. And then you get on a roll in the playoffs here, and then like all of a sudden, things change a little bit here. But as it's like an 82 game season is a grind here. And you need a guy that can come in and give you 18, 19 points. And it's not hero. And, maybe there are nights when you can rest Jimmy and you can still go out and win games.
I haven't looked at the betting odds yet today, but how much do you believe this moves the needle for them?
I think it moves it because you upgrade. Like, there's no doubt about it. Like, it doesn't take a basketball expert to say when you move Kyle Lowry, who was somewhat ineffective and was now coming off your bench, for a guy that is a starter and is can 20 points plus per game. It definitely changes, moves the needle here. Now, how does it move it closer to where Boston is? I don't know, but and I said this yesterday when I did my Heat trade guide video, like, it doesn't matter. Like, you've proven you can beat Boston. You've proven you can beat, Cleveland and New York and Milwaukee and all these teams here. I just think it gives you, 3 weeks or, close to 3 weeks to like get a jump start instead of getting a guy on February 8th. And then you got All-Star break, and then you got, like 25 games left here. Now it gives you, an extra 10 games to work him into your system.
Do you think there's another move to be made for them? Because, that you parted now with the huge salary slot in Lowry, and I don't know that the Heat are very interested in moving Duncan Robinson. Like, it would certainly matter who you'd get in return, but this is probably the big in-season move, right?
I would think so. I mean, if anything, maybe you do something with your trade exceptions. You're still going to stay under that that 100 and that second apron here. Is there a $3 to $4 million center, backup center, maybe that can give you a little bit of more protection as far as what you have already? You have to be careful. Guys that are bought out of their contracts. Miami falls into this bucket of teams where if that player salary was 12.4 million or more, they won't be able to sign him during the regular season. So you have to look at players below that, like Gordon Hayward becomes available. You won't be able to go out and sign him based on kind of where these rules are. So I think this is their big move, especially when you attach up one. It's hard for me to think that they would go out and say, you know what, we're going to go out and give up another one here, because when you get into the off season, now your picks start to replenish a little bit. Now you can, the night of the draft, you can trade your 24 first, the draft, the rights to that player. You can move a 2030 or 31 first.
Right.
And it just opens up and it gives you kind of more options.
Lastly here for Bobby Marks, from your experience in the front office, when trades are happening like this, you have a star player like Jimmy Butler, who was close with Kyle Lowry. Do they have a conversation with Jimmy before the deal's made?
I don't think so. I don't. I mean, and I think, that's I think if Miami right now is 33-9 and Kyle Lowry was playing at a pretty good clip, then that's probably a conversation maybe you have. Hey, this is, it's going to disrupt our locker room and stuff like that. But I just look at where Miami's been. And as I said yesterday, it's kind of, they're in like a little bit of a malaise, right? They need a little bit of a kick in the butt here. Like, it's not, we can always say they're going to figure it out, right? Miami will always figure it out. And eventually you would get to the point where you're not going to be able to figure it out unless you get a little bit of a talent increase.
Bobby, excellent job. Appreciate you spending time with us here today. Timing works out great. You're very good to us. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.